Hello and welcome to SAE Tomorrow Today. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Alex Grusin, CEO WiTricity. On today's episode, Alex and I discuss the future of wireless charging and its impact on society. We hope you enjoy this episode. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Excited to have you here because wireless charging is the future. I repeat, wireless charging is the future. While I believe it's the future, in your opinion, is that the missing link to the mass adoption of electric vehicles?
Well, I think having a great user experience is important to sort of mass adoption of any new technology, right? And so here we are with one of the most significant technology transitions we've seen in decades, the switch to electric vehicles. And we're bringing a cord back into people's lives, right? Every other technology in the past where we've been able to get rid of the cord, we've gotten rid of it. Think about, your cordless phone or Wi-Fi as great examples. I look at a phone and my brain still says, cordless phone. But my kids look at it and it's like it's a phone. Like they've never known a cord in their lives. So here we are with electric vehicles, and WiTricity's technology allows you to get rid of that new cord with no compromises, right? You can charge just as fast as if you plugged in, just as efficiently as if you plugged in. All you have to do is just park the car and walk away, and your car is charging.
It changes the game. I remember, I'll date myself here, when we had, for the first TV remotes, they had cords. And if it didn't reach the sofa, you had to get up. Who wants to be the person to get up to change the channel? It's similar to who's going to be that person to plug it in. Dad, you had to plug your car in to charge it. You had to do this. You're developing that technology and you're making it go away. It's a classic case of history repeating itself, eliminating and removing the cord.
Yeah, and I think people just don't even know yet that what we're working on is even possible. But it is now starting to launch around the world. And so I'm excited about going through that exact same transition. You hear people say, I don't mind plugging in my cord. But once you experience not having to, you're never going to want to go back.
You're eliminating all of the friction. You don't have to go to the car if it's a snowy weather or rainy weather. So today you have to plug in the technology that you're developing is wireless. It raises the question, can wireless charge faster than the plug?
Well, I think we certainly charge as fast as the plug. I mean, I've spent over 20 years in my career developing, sort of new consumer products, right? And what I've always found is that the winning product is one where there's no, yes, but. So in our case, yes, it's wireless and it's just as efficient as if you had plugged in. Yes, it's wireless and it's just as fast as if you had plugged in. Yes, it's wireless and you just park your car. You don't have to put it in a particularly precise location or anything like that. Yes, it's wireless and there's no moving parts. Yes, it's wireless and it could be outside under snow or rain or water and it just wouldn't make a difference. So, it's like I'm adding this great new experience, but you're not having to make any compromise. I think that's generally been the real, sort of turning point for adoption of new technology. And we should be honest. I mean, thinking about charging, thinking about range, it's still a major point of anxiety for a new EV buyer. And so what we want to deliver, what we are delivering now, is this experience of just parking and walking away. And if you think about it, if I drive my car, I park it, it charges itself, I walk away, I drive, I park, I walk away. It almost becomes like I have an infinite range car, and that's our goal, right? It's just an experience where charging is just something you just never have to think about again, except maybe that road trip to grandma's house. You're going to pull over the side of the highway, do a fast charge. That's fine, and I'm glad the government is investing in the highway corridors to make people comfortable to know that I could always get someplace I want to go with an EV. But 90+ of the driving you do is within the range of the vehicle. And for all of that time, it's as if I never had to think about plugging in my car ever again.
The number one thing that you're doing, in my opinion, you're eliminating stress. There's no stress. So I'm going to the grocery store, it'll charge the car. I'm dropping kids off at school, it'll charge the car. When, let's say a large international, multinational real estate developers developing new infrastructure, say they're building a grocery store, they're building a parking garage at a mall, can your charging technology be put into the infrastructure? So, okay, you're in spot A, I'm in spot B. It's already there naturally. We don't even have to think, oh, I got to get one of those 4 charging spots.
No, absolutely, it can be built in. In fact, from an infrastructure build-out point of view, it's no more complicated than pulling power to that parking spot for a normal plug-in conductive charge. I think, in fact, the bigger challenge across the country is we need real estate developers to start planning for charging, period, whether it's wired or wireless, right? And pulling the power to where people park. I think that the model that we're all going to be able to go to a fast charger somewhere, and that's going to become our primary way of, quote, sort of like fueling up our vehicles the way it was with gas stations, I don't think scales. I think as an industry, we need to make it easier for people to park wherever it is they charge, in public locations, city streets, parking garages, and at home.
For a real estate developer that's listening to this, is one of the simplest things they can do is put extra conduit in their garages that they're developing it, so when they have to put the electrical infrastructure and the conduits are there, they don't have to rip up the concrete?
Yeah, and I think some local governments are starting to mandate that. And in fact, not just here in the States, but overseas, it's taking hold that regulations that new developments need to have at least a certain percentage of all parking spots sort of pre-wired, at least for charging. I think that's important. If we look at the whole industry, it tends not to be the amount of power that is needed for this transition to electrification. It's actually the sort of the peak power and the peak load is what really drives cost. And so, using the hours and hours that cars are parked as a time to charge them, I think is a necessary condition for like a sustainable transition to EVs and a sustainable grid to deliver all of that power. And I don't find feasible the model that, everyone's going to be able to go to a station and charge with a fast charger, anything equivalent to the experience we've had with gasoline, right? So to deliver the aggregate range that people drive in a year, we really need to make charging where you park easier. And that is, I think, has been getting a little bit less attention than it should. Right now, a lot of the infrastructure investment is around fast charging for the highway corridors. I think the next big wave has to be around enabling what's known generally as level 2 charging, wherever it is people live and wherever it is they park. And wireless charging, our wireless charging fits into that beautifully.
There's a developer related to companies. They're building a lot in West Palm Beach and Miami, and everything they're developing, they're putting extra conduit. They're putting all the chargers in there for the electrification. And it'd be really interesting if you look from a developer standpoint, say, okay, I want to deliver the energy in a sustainable green manner. Okay, I'm going to put a microgrid in. I'm going to power the microgrid renewable energy. That makes the transition that much more effective.
Well, I think what plays as well into that is the attention that's now coming into vehicle-to-grid technologies, right? And using the battery capacity that's stored in the vehicles to support those microgrids. A lot of the most interesting conversation as well is about what's known as sort of behind the meter. And, for campuses and for buildings to, use the storage capacity of the vehicles to shave off the peak power demands of those campuses or of those buildings and radically reduce their monthly expenses, right? This concept of demand charges that the utility companies charge for sort of reserving your peak usage. If you can shave those peaks off with local storage, you can save dramatic amount of dollars. In fact, you could probably almost pay for the cars, themselves through the savings you could make. So, the biggest consumer of battery capacity in the world is EVs already, right? It's not smartphones, it's already EVs, and we're already at a small percentage penetration, of the total market of cars. Over time, that's something that needs to be tapped, is that capacity to make the grid sustainable and to reduce people's operating costs. We proved that our wireless charging technology is bidirectional. that we can actually move power wirelessly both to charge the car and from the car to feed back to your building, your campus, or to the grid. We showed that a few years ago with Honda at the Consumer Electronics Show. And I think it's going to be a key element of the future of really all EVs.
There's no doubt that bidirectional is the future, and it also opens up a lot of really interesting economic things where if you give energy back to the grid, we will subsidize, you can have free parking, or if you spend amount, we can give you a discount at, say, Target or your local retailer. So there's a lot of really interesting incentives to make individuals move that benefits business and benefits the environment, which is a win-win. So we have a lot of consumers today that own, let's say, EVA, EVB, but they don't have wireless charging on them. Can your technology be retrofitted for a pre-existing electric vehicle that's out in the wild today?
WiTricity has been focused for over a decade on enabling the automakers, right? Enabling the OEMs, the car brands to factory install wireless charging. And that continues to be our primary focus of our team around the world. And we have recently announced that we are taking the systems that we have developed for automakers and we'll be introducing sort of a aftermarket upgrade kits for select vehicles. I don't think that that's necessarily the massive scaling market opportunity for our company, but we know that there are people who are asking for it. We get the demand all the time. And we have shown that we can retrofit vehicles, and it's an important capability as well for fleets, right? So where a fleet, they've determined I'm buying a certain number of these vehicles for commercial purposes, whether it's a car share service or whether it's a municipal fleet or a meter reading fleet from a gas company. Even police car fleets are a great application for our technology as they electrify. And so the ability to upgrade is definitely, one of our focus areas. But I think it's just a step to, you're walking into your dealer and, buying a car that has wireless charging built in. That's already started to happen. The factory install has started to happen overseas. Most recently, the Hyundai launched their Genesis GV60 in South Korea with built-in wireless charging. And there are multiple automakers this year in China launching wireless charging, one of whom has already announced a company called FAW. So, you look at that market where they're all in on EVs and have been for a few years. And now it's the shift to not just, am I going to buy an EV, which I think many other parts of the world, the market is still at that stage. But in China, it's like, no, my next car is an EV. So now it's just which EV. And like any market that gets to that level of maturity, then it starts to be, how do I differentiate? Like, why buy my EV versus that other EV? It's the same batteries, same inverters, right? And so it starts to shift to, design and features and user experience. And so there are now 4 automakers in China launching this year that have said, hey, wireless charging is how we're differentiating our car from the others. So, it's an exciting time. We're engaged with those OEMs around the whole world to bring this technology to market.
The GV60 Genesis, it's a beautiful looking car. It's a snazzy looking car, and then you're going to add the convenience factor on it. Does South Korea have the wireless infrastructure in place today? So the consumer buys it at the dealer, they go home, they go to work, they go to the market. Is that wireless infrastructure charging there, or is it still in the early days of being rolled out in South Korea?
Well, I'd say it's still in the early days of being rolled out, but it is there. I mean, I could show you videos of public wireless charging stations in Seoul, for example, where you could drive the car up and charge. One of the really significant steps in building this market, and believe me, WiTricity has been the driver of EV wireless charging since around 2010, is the establishment of a global standard, right? We worked with the SAE in particular since October of 2010 to October of 2020, and we still continue to work with the SAE, of course, but to set a global standard for wireless charging. In typical technical parlance, it's the J2954 standard for electric vehicle wireless charging. But what's really significant about it is, at the SAE, all the automakers come together to set the standards for new technology. And this one was important because, cables and connectors have varied all over the world. It wasn't always clear that if you pulled up to a charging station that it would work for your car. And that's improving. But the automakers in coming together for wireless charging said, let's not repeat that. Let's just come up with one standard that we know that any vehicle can work on any charger. That standard was ratified in October of 2020, which was the trigger point for automakers to start the shift from development to the march to production. And so the GV60 is actually the first vehicle with a sort of SAE standards compliant wireless charging solution, and really, I think that many more now to come in the coming years based on that same standard. Another reason the standard, is important is like we think about interoperability, right? So it's not just about like my car and my wife's car both working on the charger we put in our garage at home, but it's also that public infrastructure can be rolled out with confidence that any car that shows up will work on it, and for the car owner to know that they can go charge in anyone's infrastructure. And so instead of the automaker now having to sell both the part that goes on the car and the charger that might go in your garage, the automaker can know that other infrastructure companies can enter the market, and they can take care of parking lots and public parking garages and the like.
The standard will accelerate the adoption of wireless charging. You have the infrastructure developers and providers on one side, you have the OEMs on the other side. So we're going to see an acceleration. Is that going to come in the 23, 24, or the 25 miles as options? Is there any time frame that you can share of when you think wireless charging will start to be rolled out?
You're going to continue to see companies at the front edge of technology introducing in the 23, 24 range, but I think the broad major global brands are more in the 25 to 26 timeframe. And that's
it's not that far away.
That's partially, in auto terms, it certainly isn't. My history is a lot of my history is in the consumer electronics and personal computer business, where we had 3 complete product lines every year. So now I've reset to 3 to 5 year development cycles. But I can tell you, like we're engaged with OEMs for 24, 25, even 26 who are actively working on product launches today. It's part of the motivation for us to take those same solutions and build these upgrade kits. And it's also feeds into the work we're doing with fleets and pilots, because they don't, particularly, fleets don't have to wait till, those later years. They can get the benefits of wireless charging now. And we're also developing high power wireless charging solutions for medium and heavy duty commercial vehicles. And again, those will be, those don't have to wait for the 3, 4, 5 year development cycles, because commercial vehicles, sort of by their very nature, are planned and designed for, upfitting and modification to suit their purpose. So you'll see, those high powered, heavy duty solutions coming out at the next couple of years.
When referencing commercial, I think of Class 8 trucks. Will they eventually be able to charge wirelessly?
Sure, although I don't think it's necessarily a great fit for long haul, but I think applications around like drayage trucks and moving materials around ports and, for warehouse to, distribution center to retail. There are a lot of classifications of the vehicles, right? You've got true heavy duty, like you say, Class 8. There are middle mile trucks where they're going between a warehouse and a retail store or supermarket chain, et cetera. And then there's last mile. So think about the vans that we see on our streets every day. And another important opportunity would be transit buses, that ride a fixed route. I think all of these commercial vehicles contribute a disproportionate amount of emissions and impact the urban environment in particular. So there's a lot of motivation to eliminate diesel from the urban environment and electrify there, potentially even faster than the broad use of personal passenger EVs. And wireless technology is really important in those spaces, but for a different reason, right? I talked about the consumer experience. It's about ease of use and getting rid of range anxiety and always knowing you come back to a car that's fully charged. In the commercial vehicles, it's really interesting because there's a TCO, a total cost of operations mindset in that space. And when you add wireless charging, what it allows you to do is expand the number of hours available to the vehicle to charge it. You can charge at the loading dock, just passively. I mean, the van is sitting there for hours being loaded and unloaded, and that time can be used for charging in a place where cables really can't live. I mean, it's the trip hazards, they get run over, the connectors break, you have these big bollards to protect the chargers. You can't really have conductive charging in that environment. But wireless just sort of fades into the background. It's in the ground, it's out of the way. So all of that time is available for charging. And when you have that time available for charging, you can radically reduce the peak charge rate because you have more hours to charge. And when you do that, you save cost. I mean, it is a major undertaking for any depot to install 20, 30, 50, 100 fast chargers. I mean, you're paying tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in demand charges. You're having new substations built by the utility company. You're waiting a couple of years. If you can even just have the total peak power, you can save nearly 50% of your operating costs. So I think wireless charging becomes a real economic total cost of ownership win in the commercial vehicle space. Similarly for transit buses, where suddenly that bus doesn't have to go back to the bus barn and get swapped out for another bus in the winter because the batteries don't have the range, or in the summer where the air conditioning is running. Opportunity charging at a couple of bus stops along the way means that bus can go 24/7 if you needed it to. So wireless charging fits in across a consumer experience. It fits in the commercial total cost of ownership. And probably the last place that gets me very excited, although it's a little bit farther out in time, is the world is going autonomous. I mean, there should be any doubt. I mean, we're going electric and we're going autonomous. Tell me how an autonomous vehicle is going to charge itself. I mean, there's no one to plug it in. And so autonomy makes wireless charging, really an essential feature, just like LiDAR, just like radar, just like machine learning, that fleets of autonomous vehicles are going to need the ability to pull over, park, charge, and then continue with their mission.
I use the term go to sleep. They need somewhere to pull over, take a nap, or have their lunch, and then go back out on the road.
Well, even our first customer to launch commercially in China has already started to launch the first 60 autonomous valet parking garages, where you literally pull into the garage and send the car off to park itself and to charge itself. And that's happening. That's happening now. I think that autonomy in certain applications may be closer than some people think.
It's very close. There's a lot of positivity wireless charging is going to have for autonomy. And I see another very large positive impact, accessibility. For an individual's mobility impairments or a senior citizen, it seems like wireless charging is going to change the game. A senior citizen, they're always worried about breaking their hip. They could trip on the cord. Wireless charging limit that. There's an individual in a wheelchair. It's very complicated to get out of the vehicle to plug it in. Do you see that as an area of creating a lot of value?
Well, it's actually a very important space for us. I think it's absolutely an area that's not been getting enough thought. If you look at the typical public charger, it is up on the curb. Often there are big yellow bollards around it to protect it from someone driving into it. The card readers are not placed at a position where a person in a wheelchair can get to. The cables themselves are unwieldy, and so wireless charging is really a perfect application to make the lives of people who are disabled in some fashion better, right? And to not deny them the opportunity to shift to electrification. So yeah, there are no moving parts. You park your car and you're charging, and you don't have to think about it. In fact, even the global protocols that are being developed for what's known as plug and charge, right? The ability to sort of plug in your vehicle and have it take care of things like authorization and billing and such, also apply in wireless. So it's been an ongoing part of the standards efforts globally that there's effectively a park and charge equivalent of the standard called ISO 15118. And so, that experience of just parking your car publicly and just, going away and it taking care of everything else is very much in front of us.
You're simplifying it. I'm going to put this in, I'll call it simple terms. You park your vehicle in spot A, you get out of the vehicle, it charges your credit card, and away you go, biddity boppity boop. Don't have to fight with the card reader if it's broken or any of that.
I like to call it power snacking, right? That, the ability to just casually top up is what wireless charging brings to the table, right? That instead of thinking about charging a car every 2 or 3 days, instead of worrying about it, did I remember to plug it in, etc., just whenever you park, you're able to charge. And I think when we think about public charging, again, instead of going to a gas station and filling up with your tank with fuel, or going to a fast charger and charging up your battery as a destination, right? We could just make charging ambient. It's just like wherever you park, it's there, it charges. I don't think about it. I top it up, and that's the experience that I want to deliver. And I think that makes the whole experience of having an EV better than anything you ever have experienced in having a gasoline car. I mean, going to a gas station was never a great experience anyway, right? Why are we trying to reproduce it? But it allows us to also, charge more frequently at lower power level, better for the batteries, increase battery life. I think that the concept in the commercial vehicle space of availability of periodic charging means that we could potentially have smaller batteries, right? If every time you're at the loading dock you're getting topped off, then maybe you don't have to have as big a battery, right? And so, I think that is same applies for buses. So I think when we think about the demands on the battery supply chain, the amount of precious minerals that are going to be needed, anything that we can do to actually decrease the battery size and still deliver the experience people require is a major positive for the industry.
I'm a fan of the smaller battery concept, and I like that. Snacking. Go here, I'm going to take a snack. I'm going to go here, I'm going to take a bite. Because if you look at the supply chain for specialty chemicals and for raw earth materials, there's not enough out of the ground today. And then the issue that we're facing today in the oil markets that we see, there's not enough refining capacity for the specialty chemicals in the minerals. So you're right on that solution. That eliminates that, which eventually bring the cost down.
Yeah, I think that in the consumer vehicles, there's still the topic of range anxiety, which I think, over time may settle into sort of, differentiated products to suit a person's needs. But the consumers are still anxious about being able to take that one trip that they want to take. But in commercial vehicles in particular, where there's a known duty cycle, a known usage, I think it's a real opportunity if you introduce charging into the process to actually reduce their battery pack size, which is probably the single largest, most costly component in that solution.
It's a game changer. If you have a franchisee that franchises a route, they go 200 miles a vehicle a day, they put the wireless charging in their depot, so they're going to go from this dock to this dock, and it's charging the whole time. You're going back to the theme here of eliminating friction, eliminating stress. The franchise owner knows that his vehicles can get out on time, his customers can get their packages, they're getting them in a more sustainable manner, and his trucks are not going to run out of energy. And for the drivers that I've spoken to, they like driving the electric trucks. They think they're fun. So it's a win-win. So you're developing this technology. at WiTricity, is your goal to become a tier 1 supplier of electric vehicle charging technology?
We support the tier 1s today. Global tier 1s are our licensees of our technology. We have created reference designs for both the chargers and the receivers that are mounted on the vehicle. And today, tier 1s build these for their OEM customers, right? Under license from us with technology transfer of reference designs and engineering support from WiTricity. And that's how the market has evolved to today's point of view, right? We've been focused on getting the standard ratified and getting these first vehicles based on that standard, into production. But going forward, it's also clear that, the tier 1s are most focused on things that get built into the car. So I think that there's a much broader opportunity for charging infrastructure that WiTricity can participate in directly. So we will continue to license and support OEMs and their tier 1s for the part that goes on the car, but increasingly you're going to see, and you'll see more news about this from us, we'll be actually providing chargers both for home and for commercial applications.
Infrastructure's the missing piece. You've said it many times about this podcast. Once the infrastructure's in place, the technology can scale as the OEMs develop new vehicles. As the vehicles are developed, congratulations on the standard, because that's going to accelerate the growth. How do you see wireless electric vehicle charge technology evolving over the next decade?
It's a great question, because there are so many different dimensions, right? There is obviously scaling to different power levels, just as other technologies have, right? What you need to charge a commercial delivery van or a bus is at a higher power level. So what I want people to think about wireless charging not as specifically like a level 2 charger. What was launched with the Hyundai Genesis, is an 11 kilowatt level 2 charger, right? But think of it more like you think about an internal combustion engine. I can design a 100 horsepower engine for an economy car. I can design a 400 or 500 horsepower engine for a sports car. You can design wireless charging for any particular power level. So one area that the technology evolves is, going to higher power levels. So, DC fast charging equivalent, I think primarily focused for commercial vehicles. And we have already demonstrated bidirectional charging, right? And I think that that's another natural evolution to support vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. And I should add, I think that that's a compelling future for WiTricity's technology, because for the battery storage to be most useful to the home or to the campus, the car has to be plugged in today, right? And when batteries are full, people tend not to plug them in. So it's like, this doesn't add up, right? But with wireless, anytime the car's parked, it's available, right? The user didn't have to do anything. So I think if you're really trying to capture the maximum value out of a fleet of vehicles that's parked at a particular building or campus, you need to know that they're going to be available to you, and wireless is your solution for that. And what we showed is that we can move the power back and forth in both directions just as efficiently. And so I'm excited about that evolution. So obviously, different power levels and the advent of bidirectional power as well. Another thing to think about is there's just a lot of adjacent markets to this EV space for us. Micromobility, scooters, e-bikes. It's an essential part of a sort of how a city is planning out its overall mobility picture. Nothing better than just sort of a public parking stand where you just stick the bike back and it charges itself. Think about scooters the same way. Instead of them being picked up and taken away in a van and then redeployed, to just have a wireless charging solution there. And another interesting market segment is delivery. And, increasingly companies are focused on autonomous delivery. And again, that comes back to, autonomous vehicles need autonomous charging, and that's us.
Autonomous charging is the future. The future is eliminating the friction. If an individual parks their vehicle in their driveway and there's bidirectional charging down there, they can get back to the grid. There was a report I read this morning from California. They're going to have enough hydropower and they're going to have rolling blackouts. But imagine if all these vehicles had bidirectional wireless charging, perhaps the California grid wouldn't be under the strain it is because of the drought that they're having. There's a lot of good that's going to come out of your technology, and I wish you absolutely the best. And Alex, as we look to wrap up this super insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
Every technology that can go wireless has gone wireless. And so I expect people will be saying to me in not too many years, "Hey, Grandpa, what do you mean you used to plug in your car?" When we stop talking about wireless charging and we just talk about it as charging, because that's what we do.
That's a great point, and I'll leave it on another thing from the 90s when you had the video games, you had to move around, had the plug, and now you go in this end of the room, that end of the room, and you go in VR. You never even thought that, they used to have to plug in the video controller. Nope, we don't think it that way. The controller, you can go anywhere on your sofa you want, because that's where we're getting. Because today is tomorrow, tomorrow is today, and the future is wireless charging. Alex, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, please kindly rate, review, and let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Be sure to join us next week as leaders from Syngin and Columbia Vehicle Group join us to discuss their recent partnership. Syngin's DriveBot software integrates easily into Columbia's fleet of industrial vehicles to increase efficiency, productivity, and safety.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.